For those of you that don't know me, my name is Larry Yusoff, and I'm U.S. Navy retired. For a little over 5 years, my commentaries and reportings were on an online radio show, probably the only one of its kind. You can ask me anything, comment on anything, and suggest anything, and you'll get an answer. But you should be aware that the answer you get may not be the answer you expected or wanted. As to the things in which I believe, here's a short rundown. Smaller government, more states' rights, the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, term limits for all federal employees, and that's from the president on down to a federal judge, a very strong military, and having border security, among other things that may be discussed from time to time. Recently, the current occupant of the White House, and he's referred to as the Muslim in chief, made a visit to a rather infamous mosque on February 3rd and followed that up with a talk at the National Prayer Breakfast the next day. I'll read some excerpts from his speeches, and then I'm going to comment on them so you'll know what this is all about. Now, let's get to his comments, and this is presented as fact. Here he is. For more than 1,000 years, people have been drawn to Islam's message of peace, and the very word itself, Islam, comes from salam, peace. The standard greeting is Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. And like so many faiths, Islam is rooted in a commitment to compassion and mercy and justice and charity. Whoever wants to enter paradise, the Prophet Muhammad taught, let him treat people the way he would love to be treated. That was Obama. The Arabic term Islam itself is usually translated as submission. Submission or desires to the will of God. It comes from the term aslama, which means to surrender or resign oneself, and that is coming from an Arab scholar whose name I cannot pronounce. Islamic true believers keep reminding us that it is a religion of peace, all the while it is slaughtering people of other faiths around the world on a daily basis. Now here's Obama again. Islam has always been part of America. Starting in colonial times, many of the slaves brought here from Africa were Muslim. And even in their bondage, some kept their faith alive. The fact of the matter is that slavery did exist in the United States, and it was a bad thing, and we ended it. Slavery itself, however, still exists, and the biggest slavers of all are Muslims. When they capture people they cannot use, or when those people are all used up, they are sold as slaves. There is no evidence that I can find that the early colonial slaves were Muslims. It's interesting to note that the same word in Arabic is used for slave and for black. So you have an idea of how that thinking comes about, don't you? Now here's Obama again. Generations of Muslim Americans helped to build our nation. They were part of the flow of immigrants who became farmers and merchants. They built America's first mosque, surprisingly enough, in North Dakota. America's oldest surviving mosque is in Iowa. The first Islamic center in New York City was built in the 1890s. Muslim Americans worked on Henry Ford's assembly line, cranking out cars. A Muslim American designed the skyscrapers of Chicago. Now, these are all factual. But to say that Muslims have always been a part of America's history, that's stretching it a little bit. We are, contrary to the Muslim in chief's statement, still a Christian nation. Now consider this. If Muslims truly were a part of our history, how is it that Thomas Jefferson had to send U.S. Marines to defeat the Barbary pirates who were capturing our sailors and merchantmen and putting them into slavery? How is it then that for over 1,400 years, true believers rose up in the muddled Middle East? The 1,400 years believing in the moon god have refused to assimilate, preferring instead to subjugate their hosts. Obama again. And perhaps the most pertinent fact, Muslim Americans enrich our lives today in every way. Oh yes, they affect our lives every day, but I wouldn't call it enriching. We didn't have beheadings in this country before Islam rose up in the muddled Middle East. We didn't have terrorists doing things as are being done around the world before Islamist true believers decided that the world had to submit. The unadulterated Quran says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that a true believer cannot be anything but a Muslim and cannot owe allegiance to anything or anyone but the moon god. It also says that taqiyya, which is lying to infidels, is condoned so long as it furthers the cause of Islam. So it's my opinion that taqiyya is being practiced by our Muslim in chief. Here's Obama again. Muslim Americans keep us safe. They're our police and our firefighters. They're in Homeland Security, in our intelligence community. They serve honorably in our armed forces, meaning they fight and die and bleed for our freedom. Some rest in Arlington National Cemetery. Yes, there are 4 Muslims buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Those are the only 4 that I could find out of thousands of others of Christian and Jewish faiths. Right now, the top spy, the head man of our Central Intelligence Agency, is a Muslim. And Muslims are scattered throughout various agencies of the federal government. My personal belief is that they were placed there in order to facilitate stealth jihad, which is the takeover of the United States piece by piece. Some police departments permit the use of the hijab for female Muslim police officers. There are special prayer rooms for Muslims only, as well as other accommodations not given to other faiths. Here's Obama again. There is an organized extremist element that draws selectively from Islamic texts, twists them in an attempt to justify their killing and their terror. They combine it with false claims that America and the West are at war with Islam. If it's true that America is at war with Islam, then it's about time that that fact was recognized. The Muslim in chief cannot bring himself or allow his subordinates to use the words that best describe these barbarians. So how can we, as a nation, understand what's going on? There's no false claims here. Islam has made it abundantly clear that the world must submit, convert, pay the jizya, which is tax on non-Muslims, or die. What other cult, and that's what I call Islam, What other cult throws homosexuals off tall buildings to their deaths? What other cult stones adulterers to death? What other cult says that if you decide to leave the faith, you are marked for death? True believers are very adept at taking selections from the Quran and twisting it to suit their needs. So that's probably a wash there. Obama again. So mere tolerance of different religions is not enough. Part of what's happened in the Middle East and North Africa and other places where we see sectarian violence is religion being a tool for another agenda, for power, for control. Yes, my friends. Islam recognizes no other faith. And if you cannot understand that, just read the Quran where it says that the entire world must submit. Other faiths have always been welcome in the United States, and true believers in Islam will never assimilate. They will not pledge allegiance to anything or anyone but the moon god. And given the chance, they will attempt to kill you. You may disagree with me, but facts ignored are still facts. Simply put, Islam does not tolerate other faiths, period.